Good evening, community. Thank you for letting us enter your devices once again. We hope you enjoy today's stories, which are quite peculiar. Stories that will not only talk about paranormal phenomena, about ghosts, but about what lives in this world. Perhaps long before we did. But we know it won't scare you, that you don't believe in those things. So don't worry, because there's no chance that when you go to sleep tonight, when you turn off the light, something will happen to you. You surely won't be the next protagonist of tales of the night. Hello, community. For a while now, I've been listening to your program. I like discovering your stories, some curious and others extremely intense. Hearing the confidence with which you share your experiences encouraged me to send you mine. Although my life is full of contacts with the paranormal, especially through the stories of my family, I want to start with an experience of my own. My family is Catholic, very traditional. Going out at night was always very restricted. Despite this, in my adolescence, I was extremely rebellious and liked to go out partying with my friends. On one of those nights, I experienced the worst. Nightmare turned reality. I was 17 years old when I argued with my mom because she wouldn't let me go out. But I waited for her to fall asleep, so I could escape. The neighborhood where I live can be a bit unsafe, Cuautitlán, but I trusted that I knew my roots. At 2 a.m, I carefully opened the door without making a sound to leave. At the party I was headed to, the atmosphere was just starting. My plan was to be there for a couple of hours and return home before dawn. As I was leaving the complex where I live, the messages on my phone started coming in, and I turned it off immediately so as not to draw the attention of anyone who might be out on the streets, with the intention of mugging me. A grave mistake in retrospect. I decided to take a path that at night is extremely solitary. And it's that, only when entering it did I have a little light. A lamp. Everything else was darkness. They had many trees and the bushes surrounding it were taller than me, at 174. But for occasions like that, it was the best place to take a shortcut. When I was halfway through this path, I felt something curious, a cold that suddenly came from behind that I felt on my back, and then entering my lungs. I couldn't help but feel that someone was following me. Damn it. They're going to mug me, I thought, and I decided to keep going straight and not turn around. But I heard laughter like children's, and then I turned around quickly, relieved. But the relief ended as soon as I realized there was no one there, no children. I decided to continue, and when I turned my gaze forward, I saw something in a tree, a few meters away from me, the silhouette of a small child sitting on a branch. But as soon as he saw me, he jumped up and disappeared among the thin branches. At that moment, I didn't know what to do. Run forward, try to reach my friends at the party or return to my house, although it was a little further away. My heart started beating very fast. I could feel it. I decided to keep going, to run. And when I got to the end of the path, a street with some light, I felt a little more relaxed. I took out my cell phone to ask a friend to come pick me up, but it didn't turn on. I got a little desperate. I didn't exactly recognize where I was. I wanted to think of a friend's house nearby, somewhere I could ask for help in case something more serious happened. I walked a little further, although there were no people on the street, but it was a little more lively than the path area. I reached a roundabout, and as I was crossing, I saw 2 very amused children chasing a dog. For a moment I started to feel calm at seeing some life, but then I reacted. What the hell were 2 children doing alone on the street at that hour? I decided to look towards where they had gone and see if they were really there, or if I had imagined them. I regret having done so, as you can't imagine. When I found them, those 2 children, to call them something, were holding the dog they had been following, and they were drinking its milk. Then they turned to look at me and just laughed. I felt a cold sweat soak me and I started running aimlessly, simply getting away from that scene. I no longer recognized anything. Not the street, not the houses, not the area. The tears of fear in my eyes began to make it difficult for me to see. I just kept running and running, without being able to see anything in that dark night, when I fell. I simply fell. And suddenly the blow against the water woke me up. I was in the Cuautitlán lagoon. I didn't understand how I had gotten there. It was many blocks from the last place where I recognized where I was. I heard a police siren. They always patrolled the area to make sure there were no couples or people smoking weed.
"What are you doing, young man? You can't swim. Get out of there."
I tried to stand up, but I felt like the water in the lagoon was sinking me further. I asked the police officers for help, but they mocked me. They asked me what I had taken, if I was drunk or on drugs. I told them no, that someone had tried to mug me, and that I was running until I fell there, without realizing it. One of the officers helped me and then pulled me to search me. He put his hand in my sweatshirt and found something. Something I hadn't seen. Something I definitely didn't know I was carrying. A doll, made of twigs, that smelled horrible.
"So you were smoking?"
He said and lifted it for his partner to take. But the other officer, upon seeing it, just hit his hand to make him drop it, yelled at him to drop that. The two officers ran to their patrol car and I followed them. At that point, I preferred they take me into custody, rather than having to return home through those dark streets.
No, stay there."
They shouted and I stopped when I saw one of them pull out his service weapon. I turned to see if there was anything behind me, but no, they were moving away from me. I heard something singing. It was the voices of children that seemed to be coming from the lagoon, of hoarse children. I couldn't turn around. I heard how the officers drove away at full speed. Without saying anything, I started walking with a view to the sky so as not to see anything that was near me, and almost without realizing it, I arrived at the parking lot of a shopping center. Thank God I knew where I was. The house where the party wasn't far away. I started running towards there, but something told me I wasn't alone. I felt like I was being chased. The dogs on every street seemed to be barking at me. My legs couldn't take it anymore and I fell to the ground. They were going to catch up to me. I could feel them, I could hear them, I thought. Okay, may God's will be done. A car stopped next to me. It was my friend, the one I thought I would call. He asked me if I needed a ride and I just got in the car without saying anything to him. We arrived at the party house. We were among the first ones there, as not many cars were seen. The music wasn't playing either.
"Bro, you look really pale. What did you eat? You're all wet. What's up?"
He put his hand on my shoulder and pulled it away. He told me I was as cold as ice.
"Andres, dude, what happened to you?"
I didn't know how to respond. I was trying to digest what I had just experienced.
"Come on, let's see if they have some food here, and you can borrow some dry clothes from Roy."
He told me. I wanted to respond, but something wouldn't let me. I looked at the clock in his car. It was exactly 12 o'clock noon. "Your clock is off," I told him. He showed me his cell phone.
"The time is right. It's 12.
The truth is, I don't know if what I experienced was real or what parts of that night were. Although I've never had hallucinations in my life. But I no longer walk calmly at night. Not even around here, on the streets, near my house. That night I felt that the darkness was about to devour me forever. Thank you for continuing to listen. We really appreciate that you're here, and that you're one of those people who make it to the end of each episode. Subscribe if you haven't and become part of the best community on the entire internet. But for now, we continue with more stories tonight. Good evening. I'm going to share my story with you, which I have to develop in 3 small moments, in 3 chapters over time. The first one happens in 1999, the second in 2002 and in 2010, the third and last, for now. When I think about the one in 1999, I can't help but see it as the first contact with them. I was 11 years old. One of my sisters had just been born. My family and I lived in a typical housing project in Managua, Nicaragua. We had never had strange problems, encounters with the paranormal. It wasn't even something we were worried about. Until that year. I believe everything started when a tall, thin man appeared to my dad on 3 different occasions. A man who would block his way at night, as if to not let him return home. My dad was a strong man. In his youth, he became a national bodybuilding champion. But even so, he never dared to attack this faceless man. There was something about him that made him feel in danger, even though all he did was stand in the middle of the path when my dad tried to come back. Every instinct told my father not to approach him, even though it seemed that's what this strange man on the road wanted. One day that man didn't appear again, and as if by chance, strange things began to happen at home. Small events that took us by surprise, since we had never experienced anything like that before. Things fell by themselves. There were noises and laughter that could be heard at night, coming from empty rooms. Things got lost. But the strangest thing was that my sister, who was just a few months old, appeared in different places from where they had left her. Once she even appeared under the bed where she slept. My mom immediately said it was elves. She said they wanted to take my sister away, so she started taking measures to ensure that would never happen. In the housing project, the rumors spread that elves were lurking around, but it wasn't taken too seriously until strange phenomena began to occur. One night, my mom had to go out. My dad was still at work and none of the neighbors were around. It was my turn to take care of my sisters, who at the time were 7 years old and 9 months old. The baby was in the hammock, and the other one and I were playing outside. Suddenly I felt something, like a wind passing over my back and heading towards the hammock. We turned and realized that the hammock was swinging violently from side to side, and the baby wouldn't stop crying. I swear this happened in a matter of seconds. 1 second. My 7-year-old sister was also crying, and the first thing I did was take her out of the room, take her to the patio, and ask her to stay there, not to go back in. Then I ran for the baby. The hammock kept swinging from side to side, and I jumped onto it to stop it. I felt the pulls as if they wanted to snatch her away from me. An invisible force was pushing her. Then I heard a very faint laugh, as if it were very far away. I was finally able to grab my little sister, and I ran out to the patio to reunite with the other one, who was still crying with fear. I was scared too, but my instinct told me I had to protect them. I hugged them while in the distance I saw that the hammock kept moving by itself. Then we heard as if someone had thrown everything in the kitchen. My mom arrived 2 hours later. I spent all that time outside with my sisters. I told her everything. And when we went inside, I couldn't believe what I found. Everything was in order. Nothing had fallen. Although, we had clearly heard that they had turned the entire kitchen upside down. Fortunately, my mom did believe me. And 2 days later, she had my little sister baptized. The phenomena then ceased. Normality returned throughout the housing project. We didn't have any more paranormal problems in that house until the second moment. The second episode in this story, the one from 2002, the one about the factory. That year, my parents decided to move to my paternal grandmother's house. I didn't like the idea, but my opinion didn't count for much. I was only 14 years old. My sister, the middle one, was 10, and she would be the protagonist of this part of the story. As in every first year in a new neighborhood, I had to get to know a lot of things. It took me a while to adapt. In the end, we got used to it, and just as I was starting to enjoy my new home, one night in the early morning, a scream from my sister woke up the whole house. My mom asked her what had happened, and my sister told her she had had a terrible dream. Still without catching her breath, she told her that she had only dreamed that she was in a very dark place, an old house, like a cabin. In it, there was a tree, a very old toad, and its roots protruded from the ground. From this tree came an old man, a small man, almost like a baby. He took her hand firmly and pulled her towards the tree. My sister screamed at him to let her go, but he ignored her. As she told the story, my mom tried to calm her down. She told her it was just a nightmare, and after a while she calmed her down and we went back to sleep. Shortly after that, they enrolled us in a small private school where the kids from the neighborhood went. My cousins, more or less the same age as us, also went to that school. To get there, we had to pass by an abandoned cardboard factory. It seemed to be closed off from all its entrances, but it had some accesses between the walled-up doors, where a child or a very thin teenager could fit. I remember that one day, I was walking distracted, chatting with my cousin, and my sister and a friend of hers got a little ahead of us as we passed by there. Suddenly I heard her. She was screaming with a horror that I couldn't describe, no matter how hard I tried. Upon hearing her, my cousin and I ran to find her. Her friend had her arms around her, and my sister was screaming that it was him, while pointing towards the factory. Who was it? I asked her. Who was there already inside?
The old man from my dream. He was calling me with one hand and showing me a piece of candy with the other.
We told her friend to take my sister and bring an adult. Instead of feeling afraid, I felt an anger like no other. I told her friend to take my sister and bring an adult. I grabbed a broomstick I found outside the factory and went in through one of the gaps. My cousin came in behind me. We searched the entire factory for the old man. When we reached the very back of the factory, to the deepest part, I saw in disbelief a saber tree. It had its roots sticking out of the floor just as my sister had dreamed. A rock fell very close to me, another one near my cousin. Someone was throwing rocks at us, but we couldn't see where they were coming from. We just felt some pass close by, and others managed to hit us. We heard doors opening and closing behind our backs, but we didn't see anything. Inside, it was completely dark. The two of us were dumbfounded by a scream that echoed throughout the factory. I felt like my head was growing. My feet felt like lead. My cousin told me in a broken voice that we should leave. I was afraid too, but more than anything, I had a desire for revenge. In the end, my survival instinct won out. He told me I had to go. I told my cousin to run, and we both ran out in terror. When we got to the exit, my dad and my uncle were arriving. We told them everything and they also went in after. But before doing so, my dad asked me to go home. I did so without questioning. When my dad and my uncle returned home, they told us they didn't find anything, that they had searched every corner. My cousin and I felt it was impossible, that there had to be someone there by force. The story spread like wildfire around there, and people started saying the factory was cursed. Over the years, some businessmen bought it. They turned it into a glass factory. We came to know that every worker reported having had some paranormal experience, however minimal, during their work shifts. And the worst hand, as you can imagine, was dealt to those on the night shift. The third chapter of this story takes place in 2010, at the sanctuary of the Elves. I was already 22 years old. I had become a huge fan of a Mexican paranormal phenomena program where they went to haunted places. My sister, the middle one, was 18 years old and we both enjoyed that program together. One day there was a report about a young man who visited the sanctuary of the Elves in the Bombonasi neighborhood in Masaya, a place where, according to legend, elves live in a cave. To get to it, you have to pass through a path that was surrounded only by bush in all directions. The path is a natural channel that leads to Lake Masaya. The legend said that at some point in the last century, there had been reports of several disappearances of children in the nearby town, boys and girls. The strangest thing of all is that the girls were never found, but the boys were found dead in the lagoon. People said that the girls didn't return because they were taken to be the wives of the elves. Since I already had, let's say, experience with these beings, I decided to tell my cousin, the one who went into the factory with me, that we should go visit that sanctuary. At first he told me yes, but the night before we were going to go, he changed his mind. The day arrived. I was ready with my film camera. I didn't have enough for a digital one. I bought a new roll of film. I had water, food, and a couple of pieces of chalk. I took a bus to Masaya. Upon arriving, I took a taxi. I asked the driver to take me to Bombonasi.
And from there, where to?
The taxi driver asked me. I'm going to the sanctuary of the Elves, I replied.
What are you going to do there and alone?
He asked me. I told him I simply wanted to see if the legends were true. On the way, he told me what he knew about the place. He gave me his phone number. He told me to call him in case something happened to me. And then I arrived at the famous place. There was a sign that said, "Welcome to the Sanctuary of the Elves." And then a descent, a diagonal drop that led to a path enveloped by natural earth walls with lots of vegetation. I went in through there. After a few minutes, I heard nothing. There were no birds, insects, nothing. The taxi driver had told me that when going down, I just had to keep going straight. And that's what I did. I started my journey at 9 a.m. and walked for several minutes. Then I managed to reach a waterfall, where I went down and kept walking. About 50 meters later, no more. Things got even weirder. I started to feel disoriented, and the supposed only path, which was just a straight line, suddenly split into two. Right or left? I hesitated. I decided to take the path to the right, leaving a chalk mark to guide me. I started to hear whistles, distant ones, and then rocks falling from above, as if someone was walking above me and kicking small rocks. I became alert and started taking photos towards the bushes. It could be something strange, or could be a thief. I was very attentive to my phone, measuring the time of the journey, which should not be more than an hour, but suddenly it ran out of battery. I kept walking. I calculated that I had already been walking for about 35 minutes since I started the journey, but I couldn't find the place. There were areas where the vegetation was so dense that it was completely dark. My body, my instinct, began to tell me that something was not right. I felt that something was watching me, that they were following me, and the rocks kept falling closer to me. The whistles were getting closer and closer. My feet started to feel heavy. My head hurt. I arrived at a place where there seemed to be remains of a child's clothing, and there, yes, everything indicated that it was time to turn back. But something stronger than me made me keep going. The desire to find that cave. The path started to seem infinite to me. I felt so disoriented that I thought I was walking back, in circles. I felt like I had already advanced maybe an hour and a half, when I could no longer go on. I stopped to rest, to think about every step I had taken up to that point. Then I saw it. A small silhouette, about 60 meters away from me. I couldn't quite make them out, but I could see that it had a pronounced abdomen, long ears, and a strange face. It wasn't wearing clothes. As soon as it saw me, it went into the undergrowth and my body didn't respond. I was paralyzed. It was as if something was telling me I had to go after it. But at the same time, my instinct was screaming at me to flee from there. The whistles returned. More rocks began to fall. Very large rocks that seemed like someone was rolling them towards me. As soon as I felt my legs again, I ran. I ran back. I ran towards where I hoped the damn exit would be. The feeling that something was following me became present. Something malignant that wanted to harm me was latent, and I cried out in terror when I realized that all the marks I had left to guide myself had disappeared. I arrived at the path that split into two, but again I ended up at the place where it split. As I saw it, when I entered, as if I were arriving again, this time I ran to the left with all my might until I ran out of breath. When I stopped, I felt relieved. I recognized a waterfall that I had passed when entering. Little by little, as I followed that path, the whistles and rocks were left behind and I finally reached the exit. When a nearby store let me charge my phone, I realized it was 9:25, that I'd only been in there for 25 minutes, when undoubtedly, I felt it was at least 2 hours. I called the taxi driver, confused. He wasn't far away. He came to pick me up and I told him everything. He told me that surely the elves had tried to get me lost. I said goodbye to him, grateful when I got on my bus back home. The first thing I did upon arriving was to unburden myself with my mom, telling her everything. My grandmother also listened to me. She asked me for my clothes to burn them. When she did, she found some red stains on my pants, handprints of something that had touched me. She told me I had to be careful from now on. A week later, I ended up in the hospital. But not because of that scare, but because of a strange heart condition. At least I had left the roll of film to be developed before being hospitalized. And in the meantime, something else happened at home. My brother received the photos, but didn't want to open them until I did. Like every Sunday night, she was watching the program she liked. When she heard someone knocking on the door that led to the street, she peeked out and looked through a crack that allowed her to see who was knocking. The only thing she saw was two small, naked legs that ran away after knocking. It's very strange what she describes, and it's that she says that it was just two legs. They seemed to have no waist or torso. She turned off the TV with her paranormal program and got into bed to cover up and pray. When I got out of the hospital that Monday, the first thing I did when I got home was look for the photos I had developed. But they weren't there. They were nowhere in the house. I asked my mom if she had seen anything, if she had thrown them away because she found something in them. But she told me no one had thrown anything away. No one knew what became of them. I still wonder if that apparition that knocked on the door, that which my sister saw, had something to do with it.